Hello, everyone. Welcome to Changeling the podcast. Uh, I'm your host, Joshua, and with us is Puka.
Hello.
Hello. So, this is our first episode. We're both new to podcasting, so be nice. And we're here to talk about our new podcast. So, we're making like the name suggests, it's a podcast about Changeling the Dreaming, a role playing game originally produced by White Wolf. Now,
Now not produced by anybody, really.
yeah, that's true. Hopefully, eventually. So,
Hitherto produced by Onyx Path Publications.
yes, and yeah, we won't get to the copyright confusion there. Um, so yeah, this podcast has been inspired by other podcasts such as Werewolf the Podcast and Mage the Podcast. You can tell by our very original name here. We're gonna do we want to do things such as deep dives into all the Changeling the Dreaming books and other associated media, potentially. The exact details we'll figure out later, but roughly in a chronological order, whatever that means. It gets confusing with Changeling publication. Yeah, so Puka, why don't you introduce yourself?
Gosh, I feel a bit on the spot. Um, well, all right. So, yes, hi, I'm Puka. Um, as we discussed before recording a bit, just giving some background into my involvement with role playing games in general and Changeling and the World of Darkness in particular. Um, I've been role playing since I was quite small, since the single digit years. Doing Dungeons and Dragons with my siblings and my dad for a bit, and then World of Darkness. I guess it was seventh grade when my one sibling went off to college and left their Vampire the Masquerade books behind. So another sibling and I got very into vampire, and then we discovered there was this whole World of Darkness thing. So at the time, it was early days of the internet, and we used to hang out on lots of the homebrew sites. Like there was Patman, there was BJ Zanzibar, there was the Anders Mage page. All of that sort of stuff was in the air. I think we also set up our own, like we had a GeoCities page. I think everybody had a GeoCities page in those days. But anyway, Changeling in particular, I actually blame Pete Woodworth, the Changeling author, because he worked at the bookstore in my local mall with the sibling that I played vampire with. And this was right when the Shining Host LARP book came out. So the bookstore was rightly very proud and had a little, you know, plaque on the shelf that said, "Our employee Peter produced this book." Um, and so I think the one time I've ever actually met him and talked with him, it was to hear about Changeling from him. And so after that, I got a copy of the second edition core book, and the rest is history. So, yeah. How about yourself?
It actually starts out a little bit similar, also in the single digits. Wasn't with my family though. It was my best friend's brother played
Oh,
D and
that's
D.
confusing.
Yeah, so we heard rumors of D&D, and we started recreating it when I was around 8, and then we eventually got into playing riffs. And around that point, like in my middle school years, I had read Vampire and some edition of Mage, but like this is a weird game. And then at some point in high school, like I'd been gaming more and more, but like off and on different groups and stuff, but nothing. And then a friend of mine was dragging me out to what I thought was going to be an alternative tabletop session, but was actually a Changeling LARP. And then I fell in love with that. That was back in Toronto, and got into that and met a lot of people that way. And then I moved to Ottawa, and then I ended up setting up my own Changeling LARPs and things like that. And so I got into Changeling very much through LARP. Then eventually got more into tabletop as well because LARP's a lot of work. And here we are today.
It's funny that, because I know we've talked about how you had such a fulfilling LARP experience as part of your introduction into the game. And it's funny that Shining Host was like the first Changeling book that I ever encountered in the wild, and I have never Changeling LARPed in my life. So
Yeah,
strange how that works out.
yeah. I'm not sure I'd use Shining Host today, but that's something we can talk about when we review the book.
Yes.
But maybe I might. I don't know. Everyone would think from your name that you're talking about favorite kiths. Mine's knockers, not necessarily because that's all I want to play or anything like that, but because I find my personality has possibly too much in common with knockers. So I kind of relate to them on a sympathetic level. How about you, Puka? What would you say?
All right. Well, so here's the thing. Um, a lot of people have asked me about the origin of the name Puka, and I mean, it's become a habit of mine to kind of give a different explanation every time somebody asks me, because I feel that that's in keeping with the spirit of Pukaness. But I think it suffices to say that I was given that name. People say, "Oh, it's your nickname." I'm saying, "No, no, no, no. It is a name that I was given, and it was a very significant, thing when I was bestowed the name Puka." But it was never. I mean, I've played a Puka once or twice. My primary like outlets for playing Changeling, there was a bit in high school, but then most of my games were forum games back in the days of the old White Wolf forums, and then Shadow and Essence following that. And honestly, like most of those I was playing, I'm slightly ashamed to say I usually played a she.
Mm,
So occasionally something else, occasionally a satyr or an ishu or a puka. But I find it difficult to say it's my favorite kith. I don't know. I think a lot of them have something to offer and points that I connect with. So yeah.
I certainly feel that way. Like, I definitely. It's not like I. I mean, my first character was a knocker
Mhm.
in that LARP back then, but I don't tend to play them much anymore. If I am playing Changeling, like I think the next character I'd want to play would probably be Autumn She,
Mhm.
because that is interesting. I don't know. I keep wanting to, that is interesting potential ideas, especially if you turn a little bit on the she concept on its head.
I'm sort of semi playing one of those off and on right now on a Discord game. It's enjoyable.
Hmm. Yeah, I really like the frailty. That's
Mhm.
the.
Well, he's a pub tender as well from House Darren, so has to be very careful
Mm.
about how chummy he gets with the mortal patrons.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did play a Puka once, but it was an NPC, and he was a Shadow Court
Ooh.
character in a LARP that shot someone in the back of the head. It's like a staged scene kind of thing for the LARP session. So,
Well, I'm sure it was for a good reason.
yeah, I think the person betrayed the Shadow Court or something like that. But like,
Unacceptable.
yeah, in a full session where most of the characters were not Shadow player characters are not members of the Shadow Court, that was fun.
Hmm.
Um,
So if I can ask,
yeah, sure.
I mean, I started with vampire, got through mage, and dabbled in werewolf before coming to changeling,
Hmm.
and I know that I'm going to turn this into a question. What is it about changeling specifically that draws you that maybe the other games don't have? Or if Changeling, if you would consider it your favorite of the games, what about it really, speaks to you?
I'd say there's more than one thing, which is probably why it's drawing me in. I mean, I've
Mhm.
always liked fairy stories and things about fairies, and so I remember reading the some edition of early edition, either first or second edition Vampire core book before I encountered it. It's like, oh, there's Acadia, the fairy homelands on the moon, and you can get there with astral projection. That sounds cool. So yeah, I like a lot of stuff with fairies and other games involving that stuff. But what I think speaks to me even more about Changeling would be the banality and glamour and
Yeah.
phrasing that in terms of my own life and thinking about things. I was more hardcore into that. Now I'm trying to take a step back and view that as like one perspective. But
Mhm.
yeah, I'd say that's the big one too. But there's a lot of things I like about the game on top of those. But how about you? What draws you into Changeling?
I mean, definitely both of those. I think it was also formative for me because at the time, so So I identify as a queer person, and at the time I was really kind of coming to grips with that. And because so much of Changeling is centered on this idea of the inner self versus the outer self and navigating one through the other,
Hmm.
finding balance between the person who you truly believe yourself to be and then what everyone else expects you to be.
Yeah.
It's very easy to read that as kind of a metaphor for being
See
being a
that
queer teen in a Catholic school, for example.
See,
So,
that's funny. Like, I'm queer as well. But I had never, until I encountered someone else talking about, I think it might have been Walking Away from Arcadia. Shout out to
mhm.
that other great podcast.
Shout out.
Might have been the first time I heard of that as for Changeling. And it's already
Yeah.
been playing Changeling a very long time. Because I always saw it, for me personally, what spoke to me on that was more of like a neurodiversity angle and having to mask for
Yeah, yeah,
society and things like that, which are not unrelated concepts in terms of interacting with society. But
absolutely.
yeah, so yeah, it's what other are there other World of Darkness games you still enjoy?
Oh, sure. I mean, like Mage is a very, very close second to Changeling,
Hmm.
in terms of my long-term affection. I always enjoyed, like, Mage always felt like a philosophy class in a good way because I took
Hmm.
philosophy in college and I hated it. But I really enjoyed the sort of discussing the nature of reality, and then having a game that kind of explores that is wonderful. Vampire, I mean, Vampire was the first one that I played. It's the one I've played longest, so it's always going to have a spot in my heart. I wish I liked Werewolf more.
Hmm.
Um, I don't dislike it, but I think I just have not had good werewolf experiences.
I'm a big
And
Farah fan when it comes to Werewolf.
yes, yeah, yeah. Well, the two characters that I've played in Werewolf, one was a Bonar and one was a Bastet. So,
Hmm.
you know. Beyond that, though, I mean, I've never played Wraith. Um, to my chagrin, I've never played Mummy, but I'd really like to.
Hmm.
I will never forgive Demon for supplanting Changeling in the roster of World of Darkness. I know that's debatable and a contentious topic, but you know, I still feel I still feel a bit of bitterness, but we can talk about that another time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For me, I mean, I'm very similar thoughts about Mage. I even tried to do it for my high school philosophy class on Mage, and my teacher kiboshed it, so I did Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance instead.
Oh no.
Um, I was a teenager. That's the right time to read Zen.
Sure, sure. And then to put it down and
uh,
never read it again.
my father gave it to me, and I was like, he thought he'd like is like a way to try to connect with me to get him to read it, but I think he just wanted to go on a road trip with me.
Okay.
But that's an interesting book for that. But werewolf, so vampire, I'm kind of not. I mean, I've played Vampire. I would play it again, but I'm not big on it. It's probably my least appealing of the World of Darkness games for me. I like to think about what it's like to embody a character, and I don't like thinking about embodying a vampire, if that makes sense. The way they're portrayed in Vampire the Masquerade.
Of course. Yeah.
Werewolf, yeah, I have political issues with it, some of the
Mm.
stuff. Not saying no one else can play it, just personally it would feel weird. I think I played in a LARP session, that's it. Like one session of werewolf like that. Wraith is one of those, like so many World of Darkness gamers, I would like to play it.
Yeah.
It, it seems like a very good game. I've just never had the opportunity. Demon, I actually had a good game of that. I played in a game of that and I was into it. And then things sort of went sideways, but it wasn't really the game's fault there. Mummy, and Hunter also.
Oh right, Hunter. Yeah, not even inclined to play Hunter.
I think they can make useful changeling antagonists, and maybe we'll
Yes. Yeah.
NPCs of various sorts, and we could talk about that on another episode.
That I can get behind, yeah.
Yeah, and then changeling sort of got me into is what got me into Exalted via the fair folk in there, which they've now kind of gone away from in third editions. That's another thing, but that's a bit of a digression from changeling there at that point. But
Yeah, all of the World of Darkness games are kind of cans of worms lined up next to each other. So,
Oh, of course. It's not just World of Darkness. Do you have other games outside of the World of Darkness that are like big parts of your gaming or worth mentioning?
well, D&D, I mean, long before I played World of Darkness, I played D&D. I remember I was telling somebody recently, my grandmother worked at a thrift store when I was a child, and when I would go visit, occasionally she would say, "Oh, pick out a book, and I'll buy it for you." And one time, the second edition AD&D Player's
Mm.
Handbook was there for $2, so that was my book for the day, and that was how I fell down the D&D rabbit hole. But that was at the same time that I was getting into Vampire. I was in a long running D&D campaign with friends. I'm in a D&D game now. Um, so yeah, that's always been part of my life. I played Pendragon. I enjoyed that. Shadowrun has always been. Shadowrun is like not a game that I would play in the long term probably, but it's fun for like now and again. But I'm willing to try most games, and I try to be familiar with even with games that I haven't played, just because they're part of the conversation, and I think it's good to know about them. And when people kind of make comparisons and say this game is like this other game crossed with this third game, I like to know what they're talking about. So I try to keep up with them at least. Do you have any others that are nearest and dearest?
Yeah, yeah. Like D&D, actually, I have a very different experience from a lot of gamers. Like I said, we played rumors of D&D, but it actually I had already been playing Rifts, which is really off-brand D&D in some ways. And then when I've tried over the years, and I think I've come to a conclusion after playing fifth edition, which I think is like to me is a very well put together edition of D&D, that I don't like D&D personally. It's not making a play experience I want. My other game that's tied for favorite with Changeling would be Nobilis. The third edition of that's like my favorite gaming book. Like I like it as a book better than any core book of Changeling, as a way of putting it. Um, and that's an even more niche game, more trouble trying to find players for than Changeling.
Mhm.
Um, Other games, I mean, I played a lot of other games. Ottawa area is kind of full of indie story game, whatever you want to call it, developers. So I played in a bunch of playtests and games with people like that here, and some of it's good, some of it's it's like I think of it like trying a restaurant from a with a type of cuisine you've never heard of before. A lot of the time, so you have to go in with an open mind, and maybe it's not going to be your regular, but
That's fair. Yeah. The sort of elephant in the room, actually, that we haven't mentioned is the New World of Darkness, and
yes,
that that whole
or Chronicles of Darkness.
Chronicles of Darkness now, yes, and the other games that are now in the Onyx Path universe. So I mean, I played Trinity and Aberrant and Adventure
Yeah,
way back, as well as Exalted.
yeah.
But out of the new slash Chronicles games, Changeling is honestly the only one that I've really been interested in.
See,
And
that's interesting. It's the only one I am not interested in.
yeah, and I know we've discussed this before, and because they're so different, they're the most different from each other, probably, of any of the games that
Yeah,
made the transition.
if to be any more different, you'd have to be Promethean, which is Mummy, Wraith, who knows, some other game, right?
Well, I mean, Promethean. Well, yeah, we can get into it when we. You know what? This is an idea for an episode down the line.
Yes,
Listeners, you heard it here first.
yes, we have a lot of ideas we're spinning off here. Nothing we're talking about in this episode means we can't talk about it in a future episode because we'll just expand upon it. But
Huzzah!
yeah, so yeah, I'm going to be, for instance, looking at soon getting a bunch of Scion books because my eldest kid wants to tries playing Scion because it sounds really appealing to him because he's into mythology and things. But
It's on my list to read this month. So
it's a book I've never read any of the Scion books, so I just heard podcasts and read Discord and forum posts and things about it. So
yeah, conceptually, it's 100% up my alley. It's something I'm keen to try.
hmm
Um, I kickstarted a project, one of the new Trinity books, a couple months ago. I kickstarted at like a higher level than I reasonably can afford, but the trade off was that I got a giant stack of PDFs for all of these games that I either haven't
mm,
played in 20 years or have never touched. So
Yeah.
I have my reading cut out for me.
Yes. You can even argue that Scion and Changeling have things in common, depending on how you interpret Changeling. That's another idea. That's several podcast episode ideas right there. What is Changeling actually?
Yeah. But at the end of the day, I think that it's probably fair to say that Changeling is the pole star by which all of the other games are kind of aligned in, well, in my universe at least. It's like,
Yep.
you know, it's the thing I compare everything to. It's the thing that has had the biggest impact on my life as a gamer. And I don't know. I don't feel any shame with
Yeah,
it.
for me personally, it also has the most impact on my life as a gamer, for sure.
Right on.
Like, it's ultimately how I've met a lot, like, been in a lot of the relationships I've been in, and met, like, it was,
Oh,
like, my 20s was like, it'd be like, the most of my people I was close to, you could draw a line, sometimes with several steps, to Changeling from it. But,
excellent.
mhm.
Whereas I was just kind of dragging people from the school's sci-fi club into playing it. So,
Yeah.
you know, college, there were more people actually willing to play it. So,
Yeah, for me, it was. I've never really played with. I don't know if I've ever. Oh, those. I'm not sure if I actually played Changeling with anyone I went to high school with, ever. And if I was, it was after high school. But that was sort of the other thing too. I ended up actually high school was weird for me because it felt like putting on an autumn side at school. It wasn't bad, but it felt. I mean, like the forgetting or anything. It just felt like this was the autumn side of me.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I mean. I mean, the whole notion of suppressing yourself. I mean, that to me is such a huge theme in Changeling that
Hmm.
I felt seen, you know?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I never enchanted anyone at high school. That's the takeaway, I
I think I
guess.
probably did by accident once or twice, but you know, these things happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Have we given enough of an overview to call this a successful introduction?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, we also have to say we are looking at aspirationally no more than once a week. And ideally, most weeks would have an episode, but we are making no promises.
Well, we could make promises and just not keep them.
Yeah, I don't want to be an oath breaker.
Spoil sport. Very well. Weekly, ideally.
Yes. So this is once again changing the podcast. I'm Josh. This is Puka, and we don't have a sign off
We
expression
don't. I
phrase.
just found a cool bookmark though. I can give some information from that as like a parting advertisement.
Oh, sure.
So it's welcome to the most beautiful bookshop in the world, Libreria Acqua Alta di Frizzo Luigi, which is in Venice, and it means high water bookstore because in Venice the Acqua Alta is when the water floods, and you would think maybe not the best setup for a bookstore. You know, if the water's coming in the door, you're going to have to start moving the books higher and higher up the shelves. But anyway, it
Yeah.
was a very beautiful place. So, yeah.
It's actually Venice as a changeling metaphor, also.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I'm going to write that down. But I mean, I'm sitting in my, ironically, in my closet because it is the most acoustically secure place in my apartment. And I'm finding all of these little random objects, which I think is a kind of glamour in its own way. There's also a
Yeah.
bookshelf here, and I'm looking at all these books, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I haven't read that in quite a while. So those little flushes of memory are a nice changeling touch.
This is like a surprisingly large closet to
I
me.
mean, I'm making it sound much larger than it is. It's not like Narnia sized or anything. But
Okay, that would be good. It gets a
yeah.
bit chilly then.
All right.
So anyway, yeah, we'll think of a sign off later maybe. But in the meantime, take care, changeling fans.
Stay glamorous.
Stay glamorous. I like it.